Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, rather. We're going to go ahead and start our committee hearings. Number one up on the agenda, Madam Chair is going to be calling together the Administration Committee. Our agenda is a procurement update from our Chief Procurement Officer.
All right, good afternoon. Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Commissioner. My name is Treasury Young, and I'm the Chief Procurement Officer for the department. I've been in this role since 2012, so I've seen a lot of things and a lot of people come, and it is truly an honor to get to present to you this morning and give you an update on our profession and to tell you about all the great things that we do every day. So our office slogan is that we are solutions-based and customer-focused, and so we realize as an administrative office that we exist to serve the needs of our end users, of our customers. And it's not the other way around. But we take that very serious because we also understand that without what we do, it would be a lot harder for our peers to be able to fulfill the mission of the department. Is that better? Yes, sir. All right. So the thing about procurement is a partnership. Right? I remember the old days when I came to work for the department, somebody showed up to my office one day and said, I need you to procure whatever it was, right? And it was like the mindset was, I'm going to say it and you're supposed to deliver. That's not exactly how it works because the Office of Procurement, our job is to know something about everything, but everything about nothing. And so our job is to ask the right questions. So it very much is a partnership where our end users identify the needs that they need to be able to operate and maintain the roads. Our job is to build business processes and procedures that are compliant with state and federal laws and that allow us to get things procured and purchased efficiently. And so we build the business processes. And then once we do that and we award contracts, it's the responsibility of the vendors, consultants, and contractors to provide the solutions and deliver the services that we need. Now, two words that are often used interchangeably are procurement and purchasing. But there are distinct differences between these two words. Procurement is basically the process that we go through to work with an end user to develop an advertisement, a scope of services or specifications, to advertise that, to put that on the street, and then to receive responses, evaluate, and ultimately award a contract. So that's setting up the contracts we buy from. The purchasing side of things is when we are actually buying goods and services off of those contracts that we have set up. So we do a lot of both of those. Our office is set up into three groups. The first one is engineering and design procurement. The second is operational. And last is our quality assurance and compliance group, which actually covers both of the other groups to help make sure that we are equipped and compliant in spending state and federal money. The first one I'll cover is our engineering and design procurement group. And this group procures a wide variety of engineering and design services. So design services for roads and bridges, construction engineering and inspection services that we have folks out there monitoring what construction contractors are doing, a wide variety of soil testing and materials testing, planning services, which includes a lot of environmental things that go into that. And last but not least, topography, which is mapping and utilities engineering. And so they do a wide variety of procurements every day. Now, this group only has one tool that they're able to use, and that is because both state and federal law mandate the use of qualifications-based selection. Qualification-based selection has been around since the mid-40s and in its current iteration since the early 70s. So this is a process called a request for qualifications, and this is a tool where no points are awarded based on cost, but all points are awarded based on qualifications and experience. There's a few other things that the state and federal law allows us to do, but all of those are related to their qualifications and experience and basically their ability to do the job. But we can only use this approach where we don't consider price for engineering and design related contracts. This slide shows you the number of procurements that group has done by fiscal year. The green represents the actual number. The blue represents the time it takes. So for fiscal year 24, we did a total of 34 different procurements for engineering and design, averaging over the last few fiscal years about 6.5 months. Now, it's important to note that this is a two-stage process. The federal rule allows us to do it in a single stage, but our corresponding state rule requires that to be a two-stage process. So we're actually advertising once to the broad community and a second time to the group that we have shortlisted. So it's a smaller group, but it's still two different advertisement times, two different evaluation processes that results in an award. So some of my favorite slides to always share is what this looks like all the way back from FY15, where we thought we were really busy and we did 399 contracts. If we could have seen back then where we were going, I probably would have been terrified, right? Last fiscal year, a total of 1,342 engineering and design related contracts, which is remarkable. And Commissioner, that it almost doesn't even keep me awake at night anymore. Almost. What's even more remarkable is when you look at this slide and you see the dollar amounts that are associated with those contracts. So again, back in 2015, we thought we did a lot at $177 million. But last fiscal year, you see that has risen every year since 2015. And you can absolutely see when the passage of the TFA of 2015, how that impacted what we were able to do in building and maintaining roads. And so last fiscal year, a total of $747 million in engineering and design services. Now, it is interesting to note that over the course of the last 3 fiscal years, the average cost of each of those contracts has actually remained pretty level and pretty flat. And so even though the total number, the whole dollar amount's going up, I would remind you that so is the total number of contracts, and so is the total number of what we're able to get done. Basically, this work is what you hear the commissioner will report to you every board meeting on the professional services, and when you get those nice spreadsheets or those PDFs from Kristen every month on the number of contracts that we executed, this is what supports that. Ms. Williams, we added the congressional district for you a few months ago, right? So that concludes the engineering and design procurement. The next group is our operational procurement group, and this group is made up of 4 sections. One group that does the contracts or the procurements. The next group is acquisitions, and they're the ones that do the purchases off of those contracts. Then we also have a group that manages our card programs. That would be our purchasing cards and our fuel cards. It allows us to put fuel in our vehicles. And last but not least, we have a liaison to all of our district offices that oversees our district procurement folks to make sure they have the right tools to do their jobs. This group procures, again, a wide variety of things, everything that's necessary to operate the department. Commodities, things that you would expect, asphalt, concrete, aggregate, road salt is one of my personal favorites, right, Commissioner? Guardrail parts, vehicles, office supplies, computers, everything that you need to operate a department such as ours on a day-to-day basis. But then also a wide variety of services. One of everybody's favorites, the CHAMP program, was procured by this group. Guardrail repair, highway mowing, landscaping, just a lot of things. We're very fortunate to be able to interact with almost every office within the department. And so there's very few corners of the department that we don't help them sometimes with their most challenging needs, and we're honored to be able to do that. This group has a lot more tools that are available to them than the engineering and design group. The first one that they may use is called a request for information, or an RFI, and this is a tool that actually does not result in an award. But we use that when our end users need information, and we're able to go out to the market and to be able to ask some hard questions that we may then use that information to come back and build a procurement, or to be able to use for whatever purposes we need to help us. Basically, we're asking the market to help us solve a problem. A recent example of that is one that we did for hydrogen refueling stations. The next two kind of exist together. The first half of that is what we call a request for qualified contractors, and the second half of that is what we call an invitation to bid. The first step in there is basically when we put out a document that says we are looking for qualified firms to be able to do whatever the services are. Now, the one that I'm specifically talking about, though, is our routine maintenance services that we actually use to do, again, there's 13 different categories from pavement preservation and on that we use to bid under that. And so that what they do is the vendors apply, we review their application, And in this world, if they are qualified, we sign what we call maintenance master service agreements with them, and they remain under contract for a period of 5 years. That enables us to do the second step of this process, an invitation to bid, to that captive audience. Everybody who is pre-qualified and holds a maintenance master service agreement. And so it's a two-step process. The first one doesn't actually result in any work being awarded to them, but the second step is the ITB, or the invitation to bid, and that's where we actually bid out the specific projects that our end users have identified out in the districts. The fourth tool is a request for quotation, or request for quote, and that is simply an award that is made based on the lowest cost. By the way, the invitation to bid is also made based on the lowest cost. We just call that an ITB so that when we're talking about ITBs, we know that that's specific to routine maintenance. Everything else that we do is an RFQ, where we are basically awarding based on the lowest cost. And last but not least, by the way, again, being the commissioner's favorite is road salt that we use for, there's a long story behind road salt. But the last one is a request for proposal, sometimes also called a best value procurement, where we look at the combination between the technical and cost evaluations, and different points are awarded to both of those phases. And the percentage can fluctuate between the two based on the needs. And again, that's how we procured the CHAMP program. It's probably one of the most significant ones, the most visible programs that we have procured via RFP. So those are all the tools. Yes, Ms. Williams.
Question about this. So you do the request for qualifications. The invitation to bid only goes to those that you've qualified, right? So it's a small, okay, on the request for quote, does that go out to a broader audience, or, okay, and what about, same as RFP, broader audience?
Yes, ma'am.
Because you're looking for lowest price there. But RFP is a combination, right?
Between
okay.
technical and cost.
Right.
And actually, the invitation to bid, we are required to post all those opportunities on the Georgia Procurement Registry. And so it does go out to everybody on the registry, even the invitations to bid. But one of the requirements in order for people to be what we call responsive is one of those mandatory requirements is that they are a holder of one of our maintenance master service agreements. So it goes out for the entire world, but the only people that are eligible to bid are the ones that are pre-approved, right? And so all of those methods are posted publicly on the Georgia Procurement Registry for anybody and everybody to see. So, yeah. So this slide shows you, the graph on the left shows you the total number of contracts that the group has available by fiscal year. For fiscal year 24, you see we had a total of 346. You notice those numbers do fluctuate up and down, and so there's nothing to really be alarmed about that. It just means that some contracts were in the last years and they may not have been renewed by our end users. But I assure you that all the needs are usually being met. So it's really determined by what our end user needs are, not by, we don't have some goal that we're trying to have a certain number of contracts. We just want to meet the needs. The graph to the right shows the total number of those maintenance master service agreements that I was talking to you about, established through that RFQC process and that is eligible to bid on in the ITB world. Now you'll note that it looks like the numbers are coming down, so a total of 374 available to us in FY24. Well, the program began in FY16. We started this program about April of 2016. And so what you saw in the end of FY16 into FY17 was a lot of outreach, a huge push to get people under contract, to promote the program. And so those contracts would have ended in FY20 and 21. And what we noticed over the course of the program is that some firms chose to bid and some firms bid a few times and then chose to remove themselves from the process. And so what we're seeing really from FY22 on is kind of a maturity of the program and more of a normalizing of the number of bidders that are choosing to be a part of the program. And so again, I don't think that's anything to be alarmed about because we always have plenty of bidders on all of those ITB jobs. So this slide shows you the number of procurements that group does, and separate from the ITBs, but the number of procurements that they've done by fiscal year. In FY24, a total of 30 different procurements that resulted in 77 different contracts. The reason those numbers are different is because many of those procurements actually results in multiple contracts being awarded, particularly those for commodities, because our goal is to get anybody that wants to sell to us under contract, and then we allow our district offices and our end users to make the decisions as to which ones best serve their needs. They may be making decisions based on delivery time, if they want to go pick things up, or specific products even. And so our goal is to get as many under contract as want to sell to us, and so that's why you see those numbers differing. But that group over the last 5 fiscal years averages roughly about 4.5 months. The RFQs, the low bids, are a little faster. The best value RFPs obviously take a little longer because that's a detailed evaluation of their technical proposals. This slide shows you the total number of the invitations to bid for the routine maintenance services. One thing that's amazing to me is over the course of our program since FY16, the end of 16, we've awarded a total of 1,841 individual ITBs. So there's a lot of maintenance work that is going on in our districts and a lot of good things we've been able to do at a total of $965 million. By the way, by the end of the current quarter, we project that we will be over the $1 billion mark in awarding routine maintenance services. Yeah. And so I remember back when we were first starting the program, and we were kind of laying this out how it was going to work, and people were looking at me like my head was spinning around on my neck about how it was going to work. And so here we are, the proof's in the pudding that we were able to deliver it. What you do see, though, is the graph shows you the amount of time that averages. And so over the last 2 fiscal years and the current fiscal year, we average about 40 days for that to get done. I will point out that 15 days of that is time it's mandated to be on the street advertised. Another 10 days, we give the vendors time to get us bonds. And there's another 10 days that it takes to set up basically our kickoff meeting. And so what that means is our procurement team members are really doing everything within 5 days. And all of our days, by the way, are calculated on calendar days, not business days, because the roads have needs even on the weekends and holidays, right? And so we feel it's fair to look at that by calendar days. And so it is by far the fastest procurement process that results in a contract and work that we have in the department. Something we're really proud of, obviously. This next slide shows you that acquisition section that make purchases off the contracts, the total number of POs by fiscal year. You see in FY24, a little over 11,500. You'll notice from FY19, that number appears to be coming down. And that's because in around FY20, we figured out a better way to procure parts for vehicles and equipment. And so what you've seen over the course of the last 4 fiscal years is that number kind of normalizing. And so we've averaged between 11 and 12,000 over the last 4 fiscal years. And so that's a pretty stable number, which is actually kind of remarkable to me to see that. But obviously a lot of work. By the way, those POs are done in an average of right at a day. Again, that includes holidays and weekends from the time we get the request to the time the purchase is made and sent to the vendor to be able to deliver for us. So again, that's something that we're very proud of. This slide shows you the dollar amount associated with those POs and those purchases and off those contracts. FY24, a grand total of $468 million. By the way, the total from our office for FY24 was a shade over $1.2 billion that we were involved in making purchases and meeting needs. So that's something we're incredibly proud of. We're not immune to inclement weather. Our office is very involved every time there is a hurricane or a snowstorm. Things such as activating janitorial and custodial contracts at welcome centers and rest areas. That includes adding an extra shift, to add an overnight shift, and adding extra staff members to be able to meet the needs. We activate emergency P cards. We're involved with the purchases for debris disposal, both the monitoring and the actual disposal. Fuel is a huge challenge, as you might imagine, during an event such as this, and we mobilize a lot of people to go respond because many of the stations during Helene didn't have power. And so we had the statewide contract holder for fuel, actually with fuel pods stationed in locations, and they were delivering to those pods and pumping out of them rather than having to go to stations. By the way, we also had a number of other agencies, including Georgia State Patrol, that were showing up and filling our tanks, and that did keep me awake, Mr. Commissioner, because I was afraid I was going to have trouble meeting our needs, and it felt like everybody else was sticking a straw in our tank. But I am happy to report, though, that we had no needs that went unmet related to fuel. Lodging is another huge thing when we deploy our staff. During Helene alone, we had 7 staff members involved, and they placed 144 calls over 64 hours to get a grand total of 252 rooms at $111,000 for those rooms. And so when everybody's without power and they're trying to find the closest hotel with power, and we're also competing with the power companies and everybody else is trying to get there and serve, it's a real challenge. But it's one that we take head on, and we've got a very dedicated team of people. One thing I didn't mention is we also allow local governments to be able to piggyback off of all of our available contracts. One of the reasons why SALT is a real fun one is because back in 2014, we had local governments that were piggybacking off of our road salt contract, and sometimes it felt like we were competing with them on our own contract. And so that's why I have the horror stories about road salt. But normally that's a huge resource for our local governments to be able to piggyback off those contracts. The last group I'll talk about is our quality assurance and compliance group. This is an important group because we believe that most people come to work every day and they want to do things right. But the biggest hurdle to quality assurance and compliance for procurement is because people just don't know what the rules are. So our first goal is to train them. We train them in what the rules and regulations are and how to do things. From that, we then monitor and we review that to see where we have opportunities for improvement. We then take that information and adjust our training, and then what I call the compliance cycle begins all over, and it's a continuous cycle over and over. This group, since its inception back in 2016, has had a grand total of 473 classes for over 7,400 students. For FY24 alone, a total of 51 classes, 971 students. One I'm particularly proud of is the first one you see is the local governments, where we are training local government staff on how to use federal money to procure engineering and design services and be federally compliant. So 4 classes and 174 students over FY24. Of course, we have a lot of non-procurement staff that we're training, 32 classes, 655 students over FY24. And last but not least, we got to make sure we sharpen the saw, our own saw. So our own team members, 15 classes, 142 students. And as we speak, we actually have a group of 40 of those team members from all over the state that are down in Warner Robins that are gathered together to learn, to grow, and to be better today. And as soon as I'm done meeting here today, I'll be going back to join them for the conclusion of that. So again, something that we're very proud of in educating. We take it very seriously to make sure people know what to do so that we can meet the needs. With that, that's the conclusion of my presentation. I'll be happy to entertain any questions. Thank you.
Thank you again, and sorry for being late. When I was in leadership, I was voted most likely to be late. So I'm trying to just bring that to all organizations that I work with.
No worries, sir.
You know, you might as well lean into your strength. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you all. An honor to be able to present with you today, okay?
I'll now call the Legislative Committee to order and call Josh Waller, our Government Affairs Coordinator, to present.
Thank you, Chairman Snipes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, full board commissioner. Thank you for this opportunity to give the first update since the general elections. So that will certainly cascade through some of the presentation. First, we'll talk about the T-SPLOS referenda. Then we'll cover the newly elected legislators by congressional district, as well as the proposed legislative leadership slate in the General Assembly. Then we'll have the initial presentation of what we propose as the 2025 legislative agenda, and then wrap up with an ever enthralling, quick federal update. So first off, there were 12 counties that had referenda. Of them, only 2 passed. So Meriwether County was a renewal, and Pulaski County was the adoption of a new SPLOST. I have highlighted there in sort of the Crimson, Liberty, and McIntosh counties because those were renewals that were not adopted. You can see Cobb and Gwinnett are bolded, and those were actually, instead of the traditional T-SPLOST, those were 30-year transit SPLOSTs. So those had they been adopted, they would have gone for a 30-year period and covered a broader range of mobility options. Apologize for the busy map, but I thought it would be helpful for you to see. It gives you some context, this election and then the last two general elections, all the counties in blue are currently collecting a county T-SPLOST. You can see in the kind of pale green the 4 regional T-SPLOST, the regional TIAs. So you see the bright red for the ones that recently did not adopt. If you look for the little green dot and the little green square, those are counties that renewed or adopted either in 2023 or 2022 respectively. So you get some sense of kind of the state of churn and of where those T-SPLOSTs are. Pickens County was particularly close at just, I believe, less than 100 votes is where that 50.1 to 49.9 was, or in that ballpark. So next I will transition over to the newly elected legislators, and I realize there are no newly elected legislators for Congressional District 1, but I knew better than to not have Congressional District 1 on the slide. They followed your direction. You said none of them could leave, and so they followed your direction. So Congressional District 2, we have four new legislators. Tangi Herring in House District 145, which is actually one of the newly created ones. Floyd Griffin in House District 149. Ken Vance currently holds that seat. Carmen Rice is newish. She was elected as part of a special election following the passing of late Chairman Richard Smith. So wanted to make sure she was highlighted here as new. This will be her first full term. And then Representative-elect Anissa Jones, who is taking the seat currently held by James Beverly out of Macon. Congressional District 3, it's the one that's currently with Ken Vance. That was sort of a newly created, it was one that didn't, because there are going to be some of these that I'll highlight and say newly created, because essentially because of the court order, they had to draw a district that really didn't have there was no incumbent sitting in that.
And what did you say about James Beverly?
That's Anissa Jones.
So he's no longer?
He's no longer in the General Assembly. He retired.
Oh, okay. He decided not to run again.
Congressional District 3, there's 6 new legislators and obviously a new member of Congress, Congressman-elect Brian Jack. So in House District 71, you have Justin Howard, that he's taking the seat currently held by Jay Collins. House District 65, Robert Dawson, that's currently the seat held by Mandisha Thomas. House District 64, Sylvia Baker, that's we'll call it just a newly created district. House District 74, Robert Flournoy, that's also a newly created district. And then Senate District 34, Kenya Wicks, that's the Senate seat that's currently held by Valencia C. Again, she retired. She retired from the Senate after the session.
Go back to 64, please.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Josh. Sylvia Baker, who currently is in that seat?
That was sort of a new. So it was Douglas County kind of got a new standalone seat. So there's no incumbent that I would say she is replacing.
Josh, can you hold a second? I think some of you need to turn your mics on so the people in the audience as well as the board members can hear us better. Thank you.
Congressional District 4, we got 2 new legislators, Arlene Beckles in House District 96. That's the seat currently held by Pedro Marin. And then Senate District 55, Randall Mangum. That's the seat that current minority leader, Gloria Butler, who retired after this session. Congressional District 5, we have 3 new legislators. Senate District 38, Rashawn Kemp. That's a seat currently held by Horacina Tate. And then House District 56, Bryce Berry, that's the seat currently held by Misha Maynor. And then we mentioned Senator-elect Kenya Wicks previously. Congressional District 6, now this is of the congressional districts, this is probably the one that's, the congressional district itself is sort of the most moved around. There are 6 new legislators. The ones we've not highlighted yet, House District 42, Gabriel Sanchez, that's a seat that's currently held by Terry Anulowicz. And then House District 61, Makia McQueen, that's currently held by Roger Bruce. And we kind of touched on each of the others before. Congressional District 7, 2 new legislators, mentioned Senator-elect Kemp previously. And then Senate District 49, Drew Eccles, who is taking the seat currently held by Shelley Eccles.
Any relation?
Yeah, marriage certificate. I hope that would be the extent of it, right? Congressional District 8, 4 new legislators. We previously highlighted Reps-elect Herring and Griffin. And then you have House District 170, that's Jacqueline Ford. That's the seat currently held by Penny Houston. And then House District 169, Angela Osteen, that's the seat currently held by Clay Perkle, and previously held by Jay Roberts, former representative, former GDOT planning director. So I would just say that district's really moving up in the world. And we'll just see whether, if I get a text or not, whether Jay actually still listens to these meetings or not. So that's my test to see if I get a nasty text from him. Congressional District 9, 2 new legislators, Sandy Donatucci out of Gwinnett, that's House District 5, seat currently held by Farouk Mughal, and then also we mentioned Senator-elect Eccles. Congressional District 10, 3 new legislators, Noel Kahan, I think it's how it's pronounced, Kahan, and then House District, and that's currently the seat held by Lauren Daniel. And then House District 117, Marianne Santos, I would say is probably what you'd call a newly drawn district. And then we just mentioned Representative-elect Donatucci. Congressional District 11, Gabriel Sanchez is the only new legislator in that delegation. Congressional District 12, we've got 3 new legislators. Another one that's sort of newish, and that's Representative Gary Richardson, who was elected in a special election following Barry Fleming being appointed as a judge. You got Rob Clifton in House District 131, that's currently Jody Lott's seat. And then House District 126, L.C. Miles Jr., that's the seat currently held by Gloria Frazier. Congressional District 13, 3 new legislators. We've touched on those 3, Senator-elect Mangum, Representative-elect Flournoy, and Senator-elect Wicks. And then Congressional District 14, no new legislators for you. Like the Seinfeld episode, right?
Yes, that's exactly it.
So turning to the leadership election, following these elections, both the House, Senate, and majority and minority caucuses in both the House and Senate had their leadership elections. In the House, Speaker Burns is designated once again to continue as Speaker. The majority leadership team is going to stay intact. On the minority side, with James Beverly's retirement, Carolyn Hughley of Columbus was elected to be the new minority leader. And then filling in also Sarah Draper, Tanya Miller, and Spencer Fry are going to be new to those leadership positions. So the others are holding positions they previously held. Senate's a fairly similar story. The majority leadership structure is going to stay in place. You've got, though, on the Senate minority side, Harold Jones from Augusta will be the new minority leader with the retirement of Gloria Butler. And then Kim Jackson and Jason Estevez will be filling in, will be new to the leadership team. So next I will transition, there's no more questions about the elected officials. I'll transition into the legislative agenda consideration. Again, this will be our first presentation. We'll come back in December and have another consideration and approval for the board. The first is enumerating a statute, the structure of GDOT's towing recovery and incentive program. A couple of months or earlier in the year, y'all had a presentation from the operations team on the value of this program, which is to incent towers to go quickly remove a crashed commercial vehicle that are on our interstates. Well, one of the things is we are continuing to look to improve coordination. That program requires coordination between GDOT, the towing industry, local law enforcement, and local governments. And so one of the things we've identified is while the program is broadly authorized in statute, we want to come in a way to strengthen it and spell out some of those criteria, how it functions specifically in statute, to help with the coordination and collaboration and communication among all the parties to make sure the program continues to thrive and provide the service that it does. The next is really just a clarification when the department is seeking to acquire common property. So if you're thinking about a condominium or other association governed property where we're trying to maybe have to acquire some parking from the parking area or green space or something, it just clarifies that the agent, the point of contact for the department in the negotiation process is the association, that they act as the agent on behalf of the owners. And this is just a clarification in law about how that process plays out in notification. And then the last one's sort of a cleanup to just adapt to the time. So we have required public meetings in both state and from a federal standpoint, and as part of our process here at the state. And there's notification for those public meetings about projects. but the timelines in there sort of reflect the days when the local legal organ would publish every single day. And so there are certain criteria as to how many days before. Like we have, the last notice has to go out 5 days before the meeting. Well, some of these local papers don't publish except maybe once a week. So it's trying to just tweak the law to account for those situations where the normal timeline is not going to work. So those are kind of the three main items for the legislative agenda. And I guess before I go to the federal, I just don't know if there's any. All right. Federal update. So the last time we met was back in September as the federal year was about to close, and the big question mark is what's Congress going to do? And they ultimately adopted a continuing resolution that goes through December the 20th. As you can see here, I took the slide that I showed back in December and I added in fiscal year 25 since we know that. And as a reminder, just to orient you, you have the pinkish, salmonish, reddish, whatever the not green color is on there, that's the CRs for each of those years. So fiscal year 25, we've got one CR right now going through December the 20th. Beyond that, we don't know. If you look at all the other years, you can see the number of CRs that they took and to what point that they ultimately got full funding, which is the period in green. So if history is a guide, you've got probably two scenarios. One, over the next few weeks, they resolve this and find full funding in December. If they have to go beyond that, it is likely we're talking about March, because you have a new Congress coming in place. They're going to have new members of committees, so they're going to probably push it to a little bit later in the start of the congressional session. So that's sort of the scenarios that we have today. And as a reminder, so with the CR we got, we received 81 days worth of funding. That's all that CR made available. And we've talked about in the past is we get CRs that push us closer and closer into the next calendar year. It can have an impact, and it's something that will be brought up in time, is the impact it can have on our timing of lettings, because the federal funds are not immediately available. That has that impact. It can have that cascading impact of delay. The good thing is that we got this going for us, is that except for Thanksgiving week, the Congress, both the House and Senate, are scheduled to be in almost every day except for that week of Thanksgiving between now and the 20th when the CR expires. So hopefully in that time period, there's opportunities for them to find a resolution and hopefully get full funding in place by December the 20th. And then last, I'll just end with sort of the hot off the press from yesterday, which is the nomination by President-elect Trump of Sean Duffy, a former U.S. Congressman from Wisconsin, as his pick for U.S. Secretary of Transportation. And with that concludes my presentation.
Just a question, I know it's to go all the way back. Do you have any observations yourself from looking at them, why so many of the transportation referenda failed this time? And I know, for instance, like Nashville managed to pass a large transit referendum, and that was the second time they had to do it, but they were able to do it. I don't know if y'all have done any look at what worked and what didn't. Since those are county things, I don't know what you look at. Yeah, but any observations?
I wouldn't say we've not done a thorough evaluation, because to your point, it is county by county. I'll say this is anecdotal from reading articles. Like in my home, I live in Cobb, and during early voting, they would interview voters. And I think one of the things that voters who went to where it seems like in this election, and obviously general elections are heavier turnout, you have people who are paying attention to the top of the ticket. They're maybe not as aware of other things. And so when they get to those other things, if one of the things, the feedback they were receiving from these folks as they were interviewed is if they didn't really understand what it was about, they defaulted to no. So that may be a component of it, obviously to the degree that, you read that inflation was the top of mind of people in the exit polls. Could that have had an impact? I mean, that's nothing new, novel as an observation of mine. It's just what I've seen out there that maybe would lead to.
I know in Gwinnett we had just passed a T-SPLOST like before, but this failed, and so I just did not know, but thanks.
I have one question. Going back to the T-SPLOST slide, you don't have to go back. It's a generic question. What is it? Is it the region that determines that they're going to go for a regional T-SPLOST rather than a single county? There's
a process whereby you create an executive. There's a a structured process that they move from all of them voting to then creating an executive committee that does final approval of the list, and there's a consultation role with the department.
Yeah, I understand the process. I'm just curious on the strategy, why you have these single counties versus the regional. Because like in my district, River Valley, you know, is the regional T-SPLOST coordinator, I guess they're called. But there's counties within the River Valley footprint that did not pass the T-SPLOST. They get the benefit of the T-SPLOST because they're in the region. But so just strategically, is there a reason why?
I would just, I guess the observation I would make is after the initial vote in 2012, when only the first 3 adopted, I think the sense among the General Assembly was they changed, not until after 2012 did they come back and change it so you could do it county-alone T-SPLOST.
Okay.
And I think once they did that, it created some incentive for some that maybe if the issue in the county was, hey, we have some notion that maybe we want all of our county money to stay within our county, they decided to proceed. And so once you proceed with individual counties, that then complicates trying to move forward with a region.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions? And we are adjourned.
Sure.
With that, I want to call the P3 committee to order. And we've got a presentation on the broadband OMC presentation and approval by our Deputy Chief Engineer, Mr. Andrew He.
Well, thank you, Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee and full board, Commissioner. It's great to be here to provide an update on the department's statewide broadband program. The statewide broadband operate, maintain, and commercialize project, and for the committee's consideration and recommended approval to the full board for the results of the OMC P3 procurement project, which we have been undertaking over the last year. It has been about 1 year since we were last in front of the board to talk about the broadband program. Our Director of Operations, John Hibbard, gave an update on this program, our progress to date at that time, and that sort of served as the initiation and kickoff of the P3 effort for the OMC project. So this presentation is sort of going to give you a background on the overall program as a refresher again, talk about the P3 procurement effort for the OMC, as we call it. You'll hear that, operate, maintain, commercialize, and then share the results of that evaluation for the committee's favorable recommendation to the board. So a little bit of background. You can see this started about 7 years ago. You're going to hear from Emily Fish here in just a moment on our efforts in responding to Hurricanes Debby and Helene. In 2017, we were also faced with a Hurricane Irma. You all probably remember that. At the time, the most powerful hurricane recorded in the Atlantic Basin. The big thing about Irma, if you remember, is that we were tracking it for a long time and it had a shifting path. Was going to hit Miami, then shifted west. Long story short, the end result is we had about 6.5 million Floridians evacuate, and when they evacuate, where do they come? They come to Georgia. Here is a great photo of that evacuation. You can see some of the radar and the path of that storm. Now, very important, as you guys travel around the interstates, you are all familiar with our electronic digital message signs that you see around the interstates across the state. We also have a number of sensors and cameras. What those devices do is they give us situational awareness of what the interstates are doing in terms of condition and performance and the movement of traffic. If you are in Metro Atlanta, all of those devices are connected to a fiber optic network. So they are wireline connected into a network, and they provide direct connection back to our TMC. So we get uninterrupted information from those cameras and those signs in terms of what's happening. As you move out of the Metro Atlanta region, those devices that you see are using the cell network to communicate. So just like your cell phone, we are talking to those devices through the cell network. Now, when 6.5 million Floridians evacuate, the cell network gets overloaded. What happens? We lose communication to our devices outside of the metro region. So as we were dealing with this event back in 2017, we lost our eyes and ears from a traffic management perspective because all of those devices went dark. Communications went out, and we are unable to know
what was going on. That really put in our minds, to the forefront of our mind of, hey, we really need to think about and work to implement a broadband expansion program for the state of Georgia. Fast forward to 2020, this goes without saying, again, the importance of high-speed internet access to the state, the importance of connectivity to all Georgians. The COVID-19 pandemic obviously elevated that importance of remote education, of telemedicine and telehealth, getting public information out, social connectivity, economic stability, and access to services. That elevated the importance of communication and connectivity for the state of Georgia. Think of it as bridging the digital divide to all of Georgians, both unserved, underserved, across the state. And we believe that GDOT's rights-of-way on the interstate can provide that middle mile connection, so that once again elevated the importance of broadband expansion in the state. So when you think of the Georgia DOT broadband program, it consists of two distinct but related elements. One is a series of design-build projects, so a traditional design-build project where we are installing the infrastructure itself. So we are installing plastic conduit and we are installing fiber along the interstate rights-of-way through a series of projects. And I brought a show-and-tell prop that I'm going to hand around. Mr. Snipes, if you'll take a look at that. What this is, what I'm handing out is one cable strand, or one cable of fiber optic network. So it's about a foot. We asked them to cut us a foot so we could share it. As you take a look at that, it's hard to understand, but within that one cable, there are 288 unique pieces of glass stuffed into that one little cable. Each one of those pieces of glass serves as a strand where you can shoot light through that strand of glass to pass information. So as we communicate to our signs and we want to post a message on our sign, through our software, we'll type in the message. That message will be shot through light, through one of those strands, to the device to then display the message. So you are literally communicating through light, is how this works. So we are installing that through the broadband design build projects. The other leg of the stool is what we are calling the OMC P3 agreement. It's a P3 project to operate and maintain that infrastructure that's being handed out right now, but then to commercialize that infrastructure as well. And I'll get into that here in just a second. So a little bit more detail. Again, a series of design build projects is being used to construct the broadband network within limited access or interstate rights-of-way, dedicated to Georgia DOT traffic operations, what we're calling the GDOT network for emergency management and traffic management. Again, talking about the issues we face with Hurricane Irma and subsequent events, but then installing additional capacity for the opportunity to commercialize that asset. So on the right, you can see a series of 7 tubes, essentially 7 pieces of conduit, all wrapped in one. 2 of those conduits are dedicated for GDOT use. That's the GDOT network for our traffic management and emergency management capability. 5 are there for the commercialization network. All right, so we're pulling, within those 7, we are pulling 2 of those cables that I just handed out. But then there are also empty conduit for the OMC contractor to pull additional fiber for commercialization opportunity. So again, so that's the design build. Then on the OMC side, being procured to undertake the maintenance of the GDOT network that is being built. And then again, operate, maintain, and commercialize the commercialization network of this infrastructure. So here's the status of our design build projects as of today. It is a series of 5 design build projects that will build up to 1,400 miles of fiber optic network across the state. As I mentioned before, to date, up to this point, we only had fiber optic network within the Metro Atlanta region. This program will install this network on all interstate miles in the state. So a dramatic expansion of the network, and is really going to be a game changer for us from a traffic management and emergency management capability. Design Builds 1, which is I-75, essentially from just north of Atlanta all the way down to the Florida state line, is under construction. About 35 miles of that network has already been built and is only growing day by day. Design Build 2 is in final design and about to get into construction activities. Now it has been awarded. Design Build 3 is in development. That is the I-95 corridor. We anticipate going out with that one next year. And then Design Builds 4 and 5 are currently programmed, but they will be delivered in the coming years. But the end result of all 5 of these design builds, again, is a full statewide fiber optic network across the state of Georgia on our interstates. Very importantly, too, this is not just installing the conduit and fiber, this is also installing additional dynamic message signs, so the overhead signs for traveler information. This is also installing additional cameras at key interchanges, so we get better situational awareness of the roadways themselves, and are also installing connected vehicle technology. So we've talked to you about our connected vehicle program, utilizing connected vehicle technology at signals. This is expanding it to more rural interstate applications as well. And last but not least, tying it back to the hurricanes, it is connecting those devices that are currently on the cell network, so that when we face evacuation type scenarios, we will not lose connectivity to those devices, and we can continue with that operation as we would like to. So now getting into the OMC project overview, and this is truly the focus of the presentation, as this is the procurement we have been underway over the last year. It is a P3 procurement, so this is a public-private partnership. It is a long-term O&M agreement, so you can see a 25-year base contract, and we specifically timed this agreement to line it up with the delivery of those design build projects. Again, the OMC is maintaining the infrastructure, so as it is built and delivered, we want the OMC to come in then and take over the reins of that infrastructure. So again, the OMC contractor will maintain the broadband network infrastructure dedicated to GDOT's use and will operate, maintain, and commercialize the broadband network dedicated to commercial use. The OMC contractor will provide revenue payments to Georgia DOT based on the commercial revenue derived from their commercialization of the network, and those revenue payments would be used to reinvest into the ITS network for ongoing maintenance and expansion of that system. So here are some of the key assumptions of this agreement. Again, O&M and commercialization services for the design and build projects. The OMC may request additional service connections pursuant to special encroachment permits and utility permits. Why that is very important, and what that essentially means is we are allowing the OMC to build what we call a lateral connection from the interstate main line up to surface roads, up to secondary routes, right? So they can build that connection. So as they are looking to commercialize this, you want to get essentially from your point of origination for the data to a last mile, right, to a specific destination. So we're allowing them to leave the interstate rights of way and then connect to last mile networks. That's when you really start talking about bridging the rural digital divide, providing direct connections to hospitals, to schools, to you name it, to data centers. They're able to get off the interstate right away and make those last mile connections. So very important, obviously. The commercial network will then have a share of net revenues. This was a biddable item in the procurement for the project to flow back to the department. The network they are building is subject to FCC regulations and requirements, so that we have to be compliant with that. Essentially what that means is the network has to be open access and non-discriminatory from a pricing perspective, right? So we want this to be a fair market opportunity. And then the maintenance and operation of the commercial network is funded by the commercial revenues, so not paid by the department, right? So essentially the money that's being generated goes into the operations and maintenance of the network. And then from the GDOT side, what they are doing is maintaining the network for us. So here's the project milestone timeline. So I mentioned a year ago, John Hibbard was up in front of you guys talking about the program itself and sort of initiating the procurement. So that was November. We got underway with this procurement. February of 2024, we issued the short list of proposers responding to the RFQ. In July, we approved the environmental document for the program. July of 2024, issued the final RFP. August, received proposals from the shortlisted teams. And then in November, we are here to ask for the P3 committee's recommendation to the full board for approval of the apparent best value proposer for this project. I will note that the P3 committee, steering committee did meet this morning and approved the results of this procurement process. This is a very busy slide, but all it's intended to do is just to show you that it's a very robust P3 procurement process consisting of administrative subcommittees, financial auditors of their provided financial statements, technical review of their proposal, financial review of their proposal, and then overall selection recommendation for the apparent best value proposer. And we are here on the bottom right with the State Transportation Board looking to award this P3 procurement to the apparent best value proposer. A little bit more on sort of what was included in the technical and financial submittals, essentially what we asked for from the OMC respondents. One, the administrative approach for the project, quality management and safety. Obviously, they're going to be out there on the roadside maintaining this infrastructure, so safety is critically important. How they're going to approach the maintenance and management of the GDOT infrastructure through the life of this agreement. Same thing from the OMC infrastructure and the O&M commercialization network. We have asked for their commercial activities approach. How will they engage the market, right? We want them to bring customers to utilize this network so that we can start to see some of those revenues flow into the program and into the GDOT infrastructure through this opportunity. Then we asked for their proposed revenue share, revenue share and minimum guaranteed revenue to the department, and their estimated O&M fee for carrying out the services of the term of this agreement. So that was sort of what was included in the procurement solicitation. So next steps, P3 steering committee P3 steering committee met this morning. Here we are with the P3 committee, and I would, for Madam Vice Chair, at the right time, ask for your consideration for recommendation to the full board tomorrow to approve the apparent best value proposer and approve the project agreement. But very quickly, this is the org chart of the recommended apparent best value proposer as a result of the P3 procurement process and this solicitation. As you can see, the recommended apparent best value proposer OMC contractor is Plenary Broadband Infrastructure with equity partners Plenary Americas, U.S. Holdings, and TKO Star Infra. Nominated subcontractor from a broadband perspective is Tilson Technology Management and Plenary Americas USA. And then you can see some subcontractors listed there, Plan B Fiber and Telecom Fiber. This team, upon review, provided a very robust technical approach to carrying out the maintenance of this network over the 25-year term. They provided a very strong commercial activities approach. They provided a strong revenue, guaranteed revenue payment back to the department through this program with a anticipated revenue share of 50-50 for the program. What that essentially means is as they do well in leveraging this asset from a commercialization potential, the department would also realize those benefits at a 50-50 share for this network. And overall, they were viewed as the best value proposer for the solicitation process. So, Madam Vice Chair, that concludes my remarks for this afternoon. And at your consideration to request approval to recommend the apparent best value proposer and approve the project agreement to the State Transportation Board tomorrow.
Thank you. I think we've got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to drill down a little bit on that commercialization component of this.
Yes.
So the subcontractor that is approved will be responsible for kind of marketing and going out and trying to determine the potential users.
Yes.
Will they fully vet those proposals, or will GDOT have participation in that to ensure that whoever is awarded into the commercialization part has a broad public concern?
Correct. Yeah, we will have full insight into that activity in terms of who their customer base is and how they're approaching that. And we need to have that insight so that we understand financially, as we have arrived at a 50-50 revenue share, that is in fact being carried out through the term of the agreement. So yes, we will have broad insight into that.
Thank you. Jim?
Thank you, Andrew. And you may have covered this and I missed it, but you did show the interstates and how that would be rolled out on, which is great. my question is, what about, secondary roads, state routes, other U.S. routes? Before you answer that, my assumption is once we get this program rolling and revenue start flowing, then those roads may come next?
We
or-
have had those discussions as to what sort of, how we want to approach this and phase it, and what do we want to try to do moving forward. As of right now, again, this is confined to the interstates, so we're looking to activate the interstates. As we think about the secondary system, one of the things that we have to understand is that we have an existing permitting structure for broadband and fiber optics to be on our state routes already. That is managed through the state utilities office. So as we contemplate something like that, we need to understand what interaction that might have with our existing permitting process to see how we might approach something like that. So just some additional considerations.
So if I understand you right, there's a concern about us competing with what's out there already on those
That's a good way of putting it.
on those type of roads. Thank you.
And let me ask a quick question, Andrew. I noticed you said DBE status was mentioned on one of the slides.
Yes, ma'am. Both subcontractors listed on those slides, Plan B Fiber and Telecom, are DBEs.
Ms. Key,
Very nice.
I have a question.
Ms. Dunn?
I'm just curious, I don't want to be competitive, but how do we rank against other states and even in the world as far as being prepared like this?
Well, thank you for that question. This is very innovative.
Yeah, I would definitely say.
We've been working through this process for, again, 7 years, moving forward, not only to understand how do we want to try to accomplish this, but understanding a new industry as well. When we engage an industry like the telecommunication industry, their needs, their desires for how they manage their business, it's fundamentally different than sort of our traditional partners. So we had to structure an agreement, structure a performance regime, all those things, so that we are meeting the market so that they could engage with the department as well. We're very pleased with this process. Other states have done something similar. We believe we've moved the ball further downfield than any other state in the country. But it's driving value out of our right-of-way and driving value out of assets that we needed to build anyway from a traffic management and emergency management capability. So a very innovative structure, and the team has done a tremendous job building it and getting to this point.
Andrew, these two and eventually additional scopes,
Yeah.
but the two identified subcontractors, are they Georgia?
So Plan B Fiber is out of Dothan, Alabama.
Nice.
Telecom Fiber is out of Lawrenceville.
Okay, so fairly regional. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Okay. So, I'd like to have a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make the motion that we present this to the full board. I don't even know how to state it as a motion.
Let me, if you want, that language there.
There you go.
that'd be-
Read
There
it.
you go.
And we seek a committee approval.
Yeah, that we seek P3 committee approval to recommend a parent best value proposal and approve the project agreement to the State Transportation Board. I so move, Madam Vice Chair.
I'll second.
Motion
Somebody
and a
else
second.
has, Dan has to second it, or
Someone in
Jamie.
the committee.
Oh, that's right, it's committee.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's passed.
Thank you very much.
Great,
Good job.
That was
Yeah,
great.
that was- yeah.
very exciting.
And it's a revenue stream.
Now we'll go forward with the committee as a whole, and at this time. We will have our, weather prep from Helene, update from Emily Fish, who is our Assistant State Maintenance Engineer. Emily?
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioner, members of the board. It's a privilege to be here again. I was just here a couple of months ago talking about Hurricane Debbie, so I'm back. I'm here to highlight the hard work of the men and women of GDOT who have been out there for the past 3 months doing hurricane recovery for the state. So a state of emergency was declared on August 3rd. For Hurricane Debbie, and that's the first of the disasters I'll be talking about today. So, as a recap, Hurricane Debbie occurred on August 5th, 6th, and 7th. It was federally declared on September 24th, the same day that a state of emergency was declared for Hurricane Helene in the state of Georgia. So we went back to back on this. Hurricane Debbie got a federal declaration for 34 counties. We assisted in several of those counties doing hauling and emergency road repairs, scraping, grading, bringing in fill material to those counties. Over 1,100 employees assisted during Hurricane Debbie, and we, this week, tomorrow, we will begin our FEMA reimbursement paperwork, and we will be filing for $1 to $2 million worth of reimbursement from the federal government on Hurricane Debbie. Moving on to Hurricane Helene, we had 2,100 employees who assisted and worked on this disaster, so double the amount, and that is over half of the department. So just amazing how many people have assisted and helped with this. So they have charged over 228,000 hours of assistance for Hurricane Helene. And today is day 57 of Hurricane Helene recovery. So that 228,000 hours has been in 57 days. We're under a state of emergency for 43 days. We just came out of that state of emergency on November 6th, and we replaced over 16,000 signs. And on top of that, we did maintenance or some form of repair to 15,000 signs. So we are still out there working on those, and you will see nice signs everywhere in districts 2, 4, and 5. At the height of the disaster, we had 181 roads closed, 124 roads passable. We had 282 signals without power, and 719 signals had some form of damage to them. We are still, as I said, we are on day 57 of Hurricane Helene recovery, and we are working in 92 counties in some form or fashion, so over half the state. The first 90 days of an emergency, which is why I do know what day 57 that we're on, is a 100% reimbursement from the federal government for debris operations. So we are halfway there, 2/3 of the way there, and we are hoping to extend that to 180 days. That will come through Georgia Emergency Management, that approval to get 180 days worth of 100% reimbursement. We are also applying for expedited funding, so we're accounting for about half the cost, and we will turn that into FEMA and ask for an expedited funding request on that for debris operations. So hopefully we will see that in the next 90 days or so, and yeah, 50% of it will come through that. So yeah. On top of that, we will are also going to apply for federal highways emergency relief funding, and that is specifically for our infrastructure. We currently have 14 projects that we are going to apply for. A lot of that is the sign repairs and replacement, signal repairs and replacement, and then we have 3 larger projects that we're still working on out there. So roughly about $8 million worth of costs associated that we will file for on top of everything on debris operations that we will apply for through federal highways. To debris operations, that is what we are still working on. We currently have 39 debris sites in those declared counties. We have hauled, this number is probably 2 days old, so I would say we're probably at 1.5 million cubic yards of debris. That's a lot of debris. There's no way to quantify it other than that. One tandem dump truck holds 15 yards roughly of debris. So it's just amazing what they're doing out there. So the map on the left is the little red pins are where our debris sites are. The map on the right, it looks really busy. That is because it is. That is every single dot is where we have physically picked up debris and moved it. So we have to track every single load of debris for FEMA. So we are tracking that day by day, and that is a cumulative look from a few days ago. Yeah, so it's coordinates, everything is on that dot when you want to see, if you want to drill down into what we're looking at. So on debris operations, we have hired a debris contractor that we already had on contract, which was a great thing when Helene came through. So they are out there hauling debris with their huge trucks, and we have to have a debris monitor, True North, right behind them, who is monitoring and doing quality assurance on those debris operations to ensure that they are doing what they need to do according to the regulations set forth by FEMA, and making sure that their trucks are full when they are coming through, and making sure that they are counting their loads correctly and documenting everything for us correctly. So they are checking all of that, and they go out to those sites daily to see if they are grinding debris yet or see where they're at on that. They are also making sure that they are doing everything safely, and they are reporting all of that to us as well. So this is all necessary for the reimbursement for FEMA, and we are just now starting that process, and it will go on for several months, most likely. So on to the next round. This is number 3. This is November flooding. This occurred on November 6th and 7th, with downstream flooding occurring through the weekend. So 24 counties were included in the state of emergency. This also impacted districts 2, 4, and 5. We had damages to 3 state routes. We will, again, be applying for federal highways emergency relief funding on that infrastructure. We are assisting 2 counties with repairs. We have provided 9 resource requests, so barrels, road signs, road closure signs. We just did barricades yesterday for a county that has road closures. It's going to be long-term. So we gave out, provided 1 damage assessment team, and we now have 3 teams out in Montgomery County and Candler County. Montgomery County, we will continue to be there for the next week. The state of emergency was just extended this morning until November 27th, so we are planning to continue to be there until then. On to winter weather. On the right side, you will see our winter weather fact sheet. That's for the statewide. Those are our totals. We go to each district and we discuss with them what their quantities and what their equipment looks like for the year, and then we publish this. So it's readily available on the homepage. It is also on the homepage. You can pull these stats up by district. So the one that you're seeing is statewide, but each district also has a fact sheet just like this. This is just a snapshot in time of our assets and our employees. So yes, tomorrow the number may change a little bit. It is distinctly possible. It's published yearly, and then we also each year do an agency-wide annual meeting that was conducted on Monday of this week, and that is when we all talk about where we're at and how prepared we are and ready to go for winter weather. District 1 this year built a new brine facility and salt barn, so I wanted to highlight that. This is one of the newest ones in the state, and it's pretty impressive. So this is on I-85 northbound in Franklin County. It provides access to 85 north and southbound, and also State Route 59. It has 8 10,000-gallon brine tanks in it, so that's at all times that will be full. So that's quite a bit of brine. It also can produce brine. So as we are actively responding to snow and ice, they will always consistently be able to fill those tanks up and continue producing brine. This barn is also, it's a covered barn, so that it's designed for them to drive through and get the tank, their trucks filled up under the roof, so that they are sheltered from the elements while they're out there working 24 hours a day doing these operations. It was a great thought to give them a roof over their head and electricity and good lighting to see what they're doing out there. All of the work was done by GDOT employees, and so that's a great thing. And we also built they built a new salt barn out there as well. And just one last thing, so we have brought in a company called Stockpile Reports, and we have installed cameras in quite a few of our salt barns, not all of them. It requires electricity, so the barns that have electricity have these cameras, and that helps us be able to lay eyes on our stockpiles out there in the field while we're actively responding, so we know what the quantity of salt is. Do we need to be purchasing more salt? I'm sure Treasury will love it when we need to order more salt. So if I can stay ahead of it and be ahead of it, and that just relieves our employees from having to drive by every single salt barn, lay eyes on it, and it gives us a much more accurate count of how much salt we have out there. Stockpile also has an app on the phones. The employees can use this for debris operations, so they can actually go out and walk around a pile of debris and measure it and tell you how many cubic yards are in that debris. And it's really very cool. So it's a neat thing for us when we're out there trying to estimate our debris piles. But they can also use this for their material inventories in the spring. They can go out and see how, walk around a pile of gravel or whatever it may be, and see what their tonnage is or volume is there. So Stockpile has been a great partner to us. So this is just an example of what one of those salt sheds looks like and what the pile measurement looks like. And so it gives us a live view of it, show us as we use the salt and the count goes down and the tonnage goes down. And then on the right is just where we have installed all of the cameras at. So last but not least, we are doing a video to end this on. I hope it displays. All right, perfect.
Tropical storm Debbie off towards the northeast. Our big story this morning, Helene. The storm is expected to have a really big impact on Georgia and metro Atlanta.
There's Milt lurking off that west coast of Florida.
Scott Headley deserves this. So yeah, I mean, our employees have been out there since August 3rd, and we're continuing daily right now. So that's all I have. Any questions?
Emily, we thank you so very much for this report, and those of us that live in parts of the areas of Georgia that was big time affected, we say thank you to our employees also. It's still a very continuous time that they're out on our roadways. Particularly, we see them on the interstates when we travel now, on the interior roads that are our state roads, our routes, and also with the individuals that live there. I know Tim's area was hit very hard coming through all the way up when one of the storms turned to the east. It hit Augusta. A lot of damage done there. We're very fortunate to have such a great group of people that are out there, and they work so hard for every one of us in our state. This report was great. I think the video showed us exactly what's going on. I saw a lot of our disaster truck pickups with the contractors yesterday on I-16, and as they were trying to clean at least off of our roads, off of the emergency lanes, down around, and as they were piling up. I think there was maybe 8 of those trucks there with the extended trailer on the back so that the claw could pick up and load up. So you have done a marvelous job. Thank you to everyone in GDOT. I thank from our executive team from Russell, as well as to all of those that are involved and left their families and their homes, even when they had problems on their own home section of what the storm did to their families. But thank you so much. A great report. Thank you for the additional information that you feed to our group, letting us know what is happening in our state when such a disaster has come across our state. We're very blessed in Georgia, so thank you for that report. Yes.
Madam Chair, I'd just also like to recognize all of the employees that are just amazing, but nothing else wanted for their attention. They were still able to attend to the daily things that needed to be attended to by the district. District 4 has just been phenomenal at not only participating in the emergency cleanups, but also taking care of all of our communities that need just regular ongoing communication with that district. I can't speak highly enough for the entire staff.
Tim?
Yeah, well, this is Stuck. Yeah, I'll be quite honest with you. I don't know whether to build a steel reinforced home or buy an ark. But we've gone from hurricanes to flooding to what's next, I don't know. So, but I do want to say thank you to Russell for being there and for the GDOT team, because it has been daily for 2 months now, and the cleanup's ongoing. It's been a lot of those pictures were Valdosta that you saw. Russell will tell you some of those were crews we ran up on as we toured the area, but it's been devastation. Agriculture has just been forestry and crops. It's $6-7 billion and up. So we're going through a lot, but we've also seen neighbor helping neighbor. You've seen GDOT people when their own homes are damaged out there taking care of others. And so, you know, we've seen the worst, but we've seen the best. We've seen the best in people. And I do want to say thank you to the entire GDOT team for not only being there, but continuing to be there. It's an ongoing process. And anyway, I just want to say thank you.
Any other comments or questions to Emily? Yes, Mr.
You're up.
Russell.
Yeah, I want to say thanks for Emily for leading, and just to highlight, she just recently participated in a peer exchange with a lot of states, so we continue to learn but also share. And there will be another peer exchange with North Carolina and Tennessee, South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, and some other states, probably Texas and the states along the eastern seaboard, to continue to learn from each other, because there's a lot of lessons learned. And Emily and her team always does an after-action follow-up, and we continue to learn from each event and grow our capabilities and capacities. But just a few things I want to hit on. Just again, to draw your attention to out of her presentation that was very good, is the federal funding is reimbursable, meaning we're paying for this now on our dime and hope to get reimbursed at some point. FEMA reimbursement traditionally has been at the best maybe 18 months, but generally 2 years or so. Make sure that's about right still, Emily. We're doing better. We're due to a lot of our capabilities, but FEMA's done better in the past too. So, but it's not going to be immediately. I know there's a quick release. We're trying to get to some of the funding to be released sooner. I don't think Josh mentioned it. I may have mentioned it, but the president had put forth a aid package to Congress. I believe Senator Ossoff was testifying today or speaking to the need of funding. Emily mentioned a couple times federal highway emergency relief funding. Congress in the annual budget put $100 million toward that. Federal highway before Helene had a $4 billion request. So just to give you some scheme of things, we're probably sort of toward the back of the line on a sort of small request. North Carolina obviously has a bigger request from the road. All the bridges they have washed out. I believe I saw this morning still close to 300 bridges they have out. I think it's somewhere between 200 and 300 bridges. So just to give you some of that. The other thing, and Kathy, I really appreciate you acknowledging staff carrying on. We've got you fooled because that's just not true. For all our maintenance activities, all our maintenance and staff and operational staff that are working on debris cleanup, they're not doing their daily jobs. So it is a challenge, and there's a lot of prideful people that don't want their areas and their districts to degrade because they're having to deal with debris. We're trying to balance that the best we can. But just understand when all the debris trucks you see, and thank goodness for them, because I don't know what we would do if we wasn't prepared and have contractors already under contract. So when bad things happen, you just activate them. Again, thanks to Treasury, his presentation, and Emily's couldn't have been better suited today. But we're out cutting and what we're calling cutting and stacking to try to make it more efficient for them to clean up, so that if we can get the piles gathered up, then it's a lot easier for them to pick it up, haul it off due to the debris sites that Emily showed. So there's still a lot of that going on. So just to point those few things out, and the video was very powerful, done right by our communications team. And the end of it says, "We're ready." Well, I think it had an exclamation point. I'll just be honest with you, we don't want any more. We'll be ready, but we really don't want any more. And Tim, if you would get, I guess if you'd get with Dan, I'd already had Dan working on the ARC. And so you get the still house and Dan's got the ARC, and maybe we'll be okay. But Madam Chair, thank you. And again, I appreciate y'all's acknowledgement of our staff. The commitment is just unparalleled. I'll get emotional talking about it. It's just amazing to see. So thank you. Thank you.
The commitment is truly great. Yes, Jeff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I, of course, echo all the comments to you, Commissioner, and the GDOT staff. I do have a quick question. You mentioned the federal aid is reimbursable, and it can take 18 months to 2 years. And during that time, we have to commit a tremendous amount of our resources, manpower, and time. So my question is, if you have any idea what this might look like off the cuff, what suffers in the here and now when we have to pull all that aside to fix this?
Yeah, so the primary impacts to our routine maintenance budget. So all the daily activities, buying materials and supplies, and even doing some of the ITB, the contract work we're talking about, it comes out of that budget. Now, we do reserve some contingency for things like this, but obviously this has exceeded sort of what we would have thought. So where you would see the impact is in our routine maintenance efforts, because we're by budget programs. And so we can get you, I don't want to shoot from the hip, with sort of what the total dollar impact is looking like at this moment. But again, we'll seek to get that reimbursed, but that'll be a supplement back to our budget in the future.
Any additional comments or questions to Emily? Thank you for a fantastic report. And again, thank you to all of our GDOT folks for always being there for the state of Georgia.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have the Vulnerable Roadway user and a Safe System Program update, and what timely to have that Safe Program update given to us as we look through our communities and what is going on. And I do not see Ron coming up. I see John first and coming up, but we are going to have with us today, in addition to John, our State Safety Engineer Supervisor. So John, if you will go forth.
Certainly, and thank you very much for this opportunity to introduce Ron to you. I think you're going to thoroughly enjoy and get a lot out of his presentation. Ron has been with us 3 years, came to us from Georgia Tech, just out the window that way. He has worked also in the role of Bike Ped coordinator for us, and then now currently as the State Safety Engineering Supervisor, and is going to bring you a presentation on vulnerable roadway users, and that's pedestrians, bicycles, things like that, and the Safe System program itself. And so with that, please allow me to welcome Ron to the podium.
Welcome, Ron.
Thanks, John. So good afternoon, everyone. My name's Ron, as John said. I'm the State Safety Engineering Supervisor. I'm a traffic engineer, and a lot of my background is in data science. I'm primarily going to be talking about GDOT's Vulnerable Roadway User Safety Assessment. This is a document that was a requirement as part of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and is a portion of our Strategic Highway Safety Plan. So that term vulnerable roadway user encompasses pedestrians and cyclists because when they're struck in a crash, they're more vulnerable to a severe injury or a fatality. In this report, the VRU Safety Assessment, that was developed almost entirely in-house by our team in the Office of Traffic Operations. So I have 3 takeaways for you guys today. First is to address vulnerable roadway user safety. We're switching to a more systemic or network level view rather than based on site-specific locations. The second takeaway is that we're attempting to be more proactive in project identification and countermeasure selection. My third takeaway is just because we're being proactive doesn't mean we can't remain data-driven. There's a variety of other data elements in addition to crashes and complaints, those reactive data that we can leverage to make data-driven decisions. So I'm going to start off by talking a little bit of background on vulnerable roadway user safety, as well as some safety trends. We've been seeing an increase in our vulnerable roadway user fatalities. Since 2013, the number of pedestrian fatalities has nearly doubled. Back in 2013, we had about 173 fatalities in Georgia, and in 2022, that number is around 343. Preliminary data in 2023 and 2024 shows similar numbers to 2022. 77% of those fatalities are at night. So that's outside of our peak congestion hours. You'll see a peak in this chart here at around 9 p.m. That's because most of these crashes are caused due to poor visibility as well as higher speeds. So to address these fatality trends, we need to be proactive. You might be wondering, why is there a World War II plane on your screen? So to explain proactive safety, I like to bring in this example that I heard from a citizen complaint once. I once received a call on the pedestrian and bicycle hotline that said, I'm having trouble biking to work on the state bike route. It's 55 miles an hour and it feels unsafe. My response was, well, I'll take a look at the crash data and see what I can do. And he responded, well, you know, son, back in World War II, now I don't think he was alive back in World War II, but nevertheless, back in World War II, planes used to come back from battle with bullet holes in the wings and the center of the plane. It became obvious what needed to be done to reinforce those planes, strengthen the wings and strengthen the center. Well, as it turned out, that was a fatal flaw. It was actually the engines and the cockpit that were most vulnerable on those planes, except when they're struck there, they just never returned home. So it's not a perfect example or metaphor, but it's a good illustration as to why we shouldn't be relying on only one data set that's particularly reactive. And that's particularly important for vulnerable road user crashes. So the intersection you're seeing on the screen is just a typical intersection I'll do a safety diagnosis on. You'll see dozens of vehicular crash data points and one pedestrian crash data. Now that one pedestrian crash data point is a fatality. Now that's because less than 1% of our crash data encompasses pedestrians and cyclists, but they represent nearly 20% of our overall fatalities. So they're a very high safety concern, but we're dealing with a very limited data set, and it can be very difficult to make engineering decisions based on one data point. So that's why we're looking to more proactive data sets. As I said earlier, I have a background in data science, and I like building prediction models. So what you'll see here is various measures of exposure for pedestrian traffic, as well as risk factors that we've correlated to pedestrian crashes. So I'll start by going through them. One of these is just the number of pedestrians on the road. Number of people crossing, that can be bus stop ridership or other surrogates for a number of pedestrians, relates to more pedestrian crashes. When we're within 100 feet of an intersection, we typically see more origins and destinations for pedestrians to cross the road. That's either a signalized or unsignalized intersection, and we have more pedestrian crashes there. On higher lane number roadways, we see more pedestrian crashes. That's longer crossing distances, more vehicles. Under a certain threshold, we see more pedestrian crashes. And when we have a median, we see less pedestrian crashes. That median acts as a pedestrian refuge island. And when we have higher social vulnerability, or SVI, we see more pedestrian crashes. Now, what is SVI, you may ask? So this comes from the CDC's Social Vulnerability Index, which is a combination of a variety of different demographic data, including socioeconomic status, minority status and language, household composition and disability, as well as access to different modes of transportation. This index is on a scale from 0 to 1 and was originally developed for the purpose of disaster reconnaissance and pandemics for governments to allocate resources in those different demographic areas. But we found there's a strong correlation between SVI as well as vulnerable roadway user crashes in a study we did with the Governor's Office of Highway Safety. So we've embedded this into our crash analytics tool for every engineer to utilize it supplementary to that crash data. And the last risk factor I have for you is speed. That's posted speed limit as well as driving speed. Now that doesn't relate to more pedestrian crashes, but relates to higher severity pedestrian crashes. When a pedestrian is struck at 40 miles an hour, is an 85% likelihood that that crash results in a fatality. Now another data set we're using in addition to our pedestrian crashes is near misses or conflict detection. We're focusing in on mid-block or away from signals pedestrian crashes or near misses. We collect this data the same way we've historically collected counts. Put up a camera and for temporary counts to detect both the speed of a vehicle as well as the time to collision, or how close a vehicle comes to hitting a pedestrian. Now we know that at smaller time to collisions or closer conflicts, we see more pedestrian crashes, and at higher speed conflicts, we see those crashes are more likely to be severe. Now this data is particularly important because in the course of 10 years, we'll often only have 1 or 2 crash data points at a single intersection, but for pedestrians, but we can have dozens in just a single day when we're using near-miss data. So moving on to some strategies on how we're combating these vulnerable roadway user fatalities. My personal favorite is our systemic pedestrian analysis at mid-block bus stops. So this was started with a partnership with MARTA, and the bottom line here is people tend to cross the road to get to their bus stop, whether there's a crosswalk there or not. And often we have bus stops without a crosswalk anywhere near. And just because your bus stop is on one side of the road doesn't mean your origin or destination is on that same side. And even if it is on that same side, to make your return trip, you often have to cross the road. So we've identified over 150 mid-block bus stop locations to install some sort of mid-block crossing. That mid-block crossing can be a pedestrian hybrid beacon, those signalized crosswalks you'll see in the bottom right. Those are on our higher speed, higher lane number roadways. Rapid flashing beacons, those are for lower speed, lower lane number roadways. And then our lowest speed, lowest lane number, and lowest traffic volume roadways, we're even installing raised crosswalks. We're using those risk factors I mentioned earlier to prioritize the locations of these. As I mentioned, there's over 150 just on the MARTA system alone, and we've identified hundreds more on all the various transit agencies across the state. Another systemic initiative we have is our network scans for roadway reconfigurations. In our crash analytics tool, we can look for roadways with 2 lanes in each direction under a certain volume threshold that we can convert into 1 lane in each direction with a 2-way left turn lane, often with a median involved and bicycle accommodations. So these are benefits for all types of roadway users, not just bikes and pedestrians. That's because there is less weaving around vehicles due to that added left turn lane, often less angle crashes, better sight lines, less and shorter crossing distance for those pedestrians, and of course, multimodal accommodations for all roadway users. Typically, this can even improve traffic flow when we're under 20,000 vehicles a day. Of projects implemented thus far, we've seen an average benefit cost ratio of 32 for these projects. We're even able to implement these in collaboration with state maintenance as we review many of those state maintenance projects in the safety program. Now, another initiative we have is the equipment purchase program. This is where we buy equipment and locals use their own mechanisms to install that safety equipment. We've implemented over 90 projects thus far of equipment such as pedestrian signal heads, speed feedback signs, audible or accessible pedestrian signals, and rapid flashing beacons. These projects are fairly low cost because we don't have to deal with the installation of them, the locals do. So we've had an average benefit cost ratio of around 70 for these and over $2 million of equipment purchased thus far. We really want to see those numbers increase in the next fiscal year. And I want to draw your attention to that little light on the rapid flashing beacon here. So this relates to another initiative we have on nighttime visibility. Here we're trying to install lighting on mid-block crosswalks to illuminate the pedestrians in the road. We've even improved our detail for rapid flashing beacons to include that light on it. This initiative is in partnership with Everyday Counts, an FHWA initiative. Now, we're not just doing lights on the crosswalks, but we're also installing lighting on existing utility poles in locations with high amounts of vulnerable roadway users. Now, another set of initiatives we have is our Rural Active Transportation Plan. This is a plan I'm the manager of, and we're in year 1 of 3 for this plan. It's on a focus for outside of MPOs. We're looking to come up with a list of projects in communities under 5,000 in population, because that's where they need the help the most. Not many people are doing planning for them. And we're looking to reevaluate our state bicycle route and review our complete streets policy. So there are many elements to this plan. I could have a whole presentation on this, but I'm going to focus just today on connectivity. But in addition, there's level of comfort and safety with numerous other benefits, including economic vitality, pollution reduction, emissions reduction, and public health. But for connectivity, what we're doing is focusing on our existing active transportation network. So our state bike routes, our U.S. bike routes, as well as rural multi-use trails over 10 mile in length. We're prioritizing the locations outside of MPOs, as I said a little earlier. And what we're going to do, or what we've done, is assess demand via land use, population, and employment density, and assess need for these different active transportation facilities through that same social vulnerability data I mentioned earlier from the CDC. So what you're seeing here is over in District 5, locations of high need and high demand, where those two overlapped, and our state bike routes in red, or in gray. What we can do is look for opportunities to realign our state bike routes through those locations of high need and high demand, as well as potentially develop new state bike routes through different communities. Another part of that plan is evaluating our complete streets policy. One thing we've already done for this is develop different details and specifications for rapid flashing beacons so contractors can install these rather easily. So moving on to partnerships that we have to develop all these various strategies. We have our Vulnerable Roadway User Task Team that is in cooperation with the Governor's Office of Highway Safety. This combines a variety of different local governments, other state entities, law enforcement, trail organizations, and much more to come up with these various strategies, and others even implement it as well. I'll highlight one particular partner, which is Georgia Bikes, a nonprofit organization that is now known as Go Georgia because they encompass both pedestrian and bicycle safety. They host our annual Bike Walk Live Summit that was recently in Decatur. This is a summit that helps educate practitioners about how to do vulnerable roadway user safety assessments. Additionally, Georgia Bikes, or Go Georgia, assists in the management of various regional commission contracts on bicycle and pedestrian planning to help, align all those different regional commissions under that same goal. We also have partnerships with a variety of different schools. We have 523 K-12 school partners in our Safe Routes to School program, which focuses on empowering communities to walk and bike to school. We have 400 partner organizations such as law enforcement or regional commissions or local governments in general that help to keep this Safe Routes to School program going. We've done 210 educational sessions, which can be safe biking education assemblies or different biking and walking school buses, which is where we walk or bike to school and collect all the students along the way because there's safety in numbers as you walk or bike to school. And if you're interested in one of these, just let me know. We've had a variety of different elected officials come on these before. Additionally, the Safe Routes to School program has had 13 safety walks in 2023, where we look to evaluate different engineering recommendations around these schools that we can implement. And my final partnership is with our communications team. We've had a variety of different Instagram videos or reels, such as the one on how to use a pedestrian hybrid beacon, our Ahead of the Curve podcast on vulnerable roadway user safety, a partnership with LEGO where we designed a protected bicycle intersection designed by yours truly, the See and Be Seen campaign, which focuses on nighttime visibility for pedestrians, as well as the Keep Georgia Safe, a K-12 road safety program initiative that is free, and we've had videos on both bicycle and pedestrian safety. So tying it back to those three key takeaways I brought up at the beginning, we're shifting towards a more systemic approach, not based on site-specific, but things such as that MARTA bus stop analysis or our bus stop analysis on networks or the Rural Active Transportation Plan. We're looking to be more proactive and not just so reliant on crash data to make safety decisions. And just because we're being proactive doesn't mean we can't be data-driven. We have a variety of new data, such as those risk factors and measures of exposure, near-miss analysis that can be leveraged supplementary to crash data. So thank you guys very much, and I would love to take any questions you have.
Do you have any questions or comments, Tavon? Good presentation, and it's something that I'm excited about because safety is a top priority for GDOT as it is. And to have this information provided to us today is fantastic. Any comments, Jeff?
I'm just curious, because I really appreciate this, knowing this information, but, and maybe you mentioned it also, but how many pedestrian crossings do you think occur in what I'm going to call as non-designated areas? Do you have a number on that?
So, it depends what the origins and destinations are. We have a template that kind of helps us assess what's around a roadway. And when we see things that attract pedestrians to cross, if there isn't a crossing nearby, we likely need to install some sort of crossing because pedestrians don't necessarily follow rules. And part of the Safe Systems approach is we acknowledge that humans make mistakes, and we try to accommodate those mistakes and make it practical to cross at some sort of crossing or mid-block crossing, particularly those bus stops, which are another piece of the infrastructure.
Okay, because I don't know how you'd quantify this example, but months ago on US 41, which was 3 lanes going in one direction, there was a guy in a motorized wheelchair crossing 3 lanes. Of course, he got into the median and wrecked. Thank God he didn't wreck in the road, but the first thing that went through my mind is how can you prevent stuff like that from happening? That was a poor judgment on his side, but traffic is at least, the posted speed limit is around 55 through there, which means they're going 75.
So it's a great question. When we get to a high enough speed and high enough lane number roadways, a crossing isn't just enough. We tend to need some sort of roadway improvement to permit a pedestrian crossing, or we need to put up some sort of barricade to prevent those pedestrian crossings. A good example of this is that systemic bus stop analysis I conducted. One location that came up was over a high speed, or was over a freeway, and I was like, whoa, pedestrians shouldn't be crossing here. So instead of putting up a pedestrian hybrid beacon, we're doing some sort of barrier design instead to prevent that type of crossing from happening in the first place.
Anyone else? Thank you, Ron. Thank you, John, for introducing to us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Before we adjourn the committee as a whole, I want to again invite everyone to our board meeting in the morning that starts at 9 a.m. And I look forward to seeing everyone. And with that, we stand adjourned.